Well, hello, everybody. I am Lisa Griggs. I am one of the co hosts here today at the feed. It's Faces of Epilepsy Everyday. As you know, we have our amazing producer in the background back there, Michael Hall, who is responsible for helping us to get this show, launched, which is such a labor of love. And I am so excited today. Today is episode 9, and we have a very special guest on all the way from, let's let him tell you that story. So really excited about this interview today. Jinx, can you come on here? Jinx proof. Where are you at today, sir?
I am in Seattle, Washington.
Seattle, Washington. So we're both on the West Coast. Are you from Seattle?
I was born in California, but I've been here 90% of my life. So my dad moved up here. I was maybe third grade or something. I'm 57 now, so I've been here a minute. It's definitely my home. So aside from being born in California, this is definitely my place.
Well, you probably made it out of there in the right time. They're having a lot of issues these days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I am so excited to interview you today for the feed. This is really big deal. I know that you don't really advocate for epilepsy. It sounds like you do a lot of advocacy for autism. I have a cousin that's autistic. My aunt's daughter is autistic. And obviously there is sort of a big correlation, between autism and epilepsy because the inflammation that is in the body, specifically neurologically. So they do kind of go, hand in hand. But we have a lot to unpack today because you are an epileptic.
Yes.
However, you have had tremendous success in life, and your epilepsy has not hindered you from doing the things that you wanted to do that caused you to be quite successful. Which, by the way, I love your glasses. I have to say that. We're sort of kind of twinning, but not really. But I do love your glasses. So thank you for dressing for the occasion. So what, I guess where I want to start is what kind of, well, first of all, when were you diagnosed with epilepsy? Were you diagnosed as a young person or later in life?
No, it's been about maybe 10 years now. I was in my late 40s. I definitely didn't grow up with epilepsy or, nobody in my family. I was sitting in my living room one day and I was like freezing cold. And then all of a sudden I was like super hot. Like my head was dripping like a professional basketball player. And then I was freezing again. I didn't know, but a seizure is your brain overheating. So that's why I would go from hot to cold, is my body was trying to cool my brain down. And then it would stop, and I'd go back to hot. And my wife said I was just sitting there, threw my hands straight up in the air, slid out of my chair in the living room, and went into a grand mal seizure. And that's when it all started. And, the ambulance and the firemen came and all that. And then it basically just kept happening, to...
Wow. After that, it kept happening over and over again?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. It was, they were pretty frequent. It was, it was strange, because I didn't grow up epileptic. I've never had a seizure in my life. And the ones I was having were pretty major. Luckily, the first one, my wife was home, and Rose used to be a fitness instructor. And to be a certified fitness instructor, you have to know CPR, you have to know this, so I actually wasn't breathing, and my face, hands, and tongue were turning blue. And when your tongue is blue, you haven't taken a breath in a long time. She said I was just wheezing, like trying to breathe. So she actually ended up giving me CPR until the ambulance got there and got me breathing again. And like I say, luckily she was home, because I most likely would have suffocated to death. Or when you go that long, it can be some pretty serious brain damage. So it was pretty scary. And it was so weird because it didn't seem real to me whenever I came out of seizures. Like, there's a couple times I've had seizures and Rose will be like calming me down, because I know she's like, honey, you just had a seizure. Like one time I looked at her, I said, how do you know? Because it doesn't seem, because it's like lights off, lights on. It's not like I remember any of it, or it's like, so it didn't seem real to me. And Next thing you know, the house is full of firemen. Sorry, my phone didn't get compared to that.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned about the heat and then the coldness. Um, that plays a huge part
Sorry about
in
that.
that's okay. That heat and cold, that was something that I saw my son having a great deal of towards the end of his epilepsy. So he was
Yeah.
diagnosed when he was 14 with juvenile
Wow.
epilepsy
Wow.
and many, many grand malls, hundreds of them, so many so that I could not count. But
Wow.
towards the end of his life, the last night, Jinx, that I saw him, but my last meal with him, he took me out to dinner. Actually, he paid for the meal, and it was almost like a sending off. It was almost like that last time that I met up with him.
All
It
right.
was like, it was like it was, I don't know. It was like a sending off. I can't explain it. It was almost like everything, even the song choices that he picked on the stereo. Our conversation with the waiter, my conversation with him. I mean, every single thing. It was supposed to be that way. And I'm a woman of faith, so I don't believe in coincidences. Coincidences to me are just coinciding events, but everything's very orderly and every planned out.
Sure.
And there's
Which
purpose
is
in all of it.
it's such a blessing, not that you lost your son, but that you got to do that compared to
Yeah.
just, oh, he's gone, or coming in his room and he's gone, or stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
It's
That was
it's
definitely
quite a
the grace of
blessing.
God.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm sure most,
But I noticed at
sounds
that
funny to call it
dinner,
a blessing. But
I
go ahead.
noticed
Sorry.
at that dinner, Jinx, that sweating that you were talking about. And I've never seen him experience that before in all the
Hmm.
4 years until later on, where he would just have that profuse sweating off of
Yes.
his body, and his head at that dinner was just pouring
Yeah.
down. And I would say to him,
Yeah.
son, you're burning up. You're literally sweating
Yes.
drops of sweat. And you just really helped me kind of put that piece together, that his
Yeah.
body was so on fire. And I now
Yeah.
realize that a lot of that has to do with diet and, the inflammation and the just high omega-6s that he was eating. I
Hmm.
didn't know that at the time that
Hmm.
played such a big part. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. So after you had your seizure, were you diagnosed like right away?
No, they weren't sure. They asked me a bunch of questions. Like drug use, stuff like that. You know, I I definitely wasn't using drugs.
Mm-hmm.
As a kid, I did.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna lie. Back in the day, I definitely indulged in some stuff, and but it doesn't. There was such a huge span between that and when I had my first seizure. It's kind of hard to believe that's why. In
Yeah.
epilepsy, as you probably know, it's just this broad term they give, and it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like we're not sure, but something's wrong with your brain. You know what I mean? So. Um, yeah, it was, and like you say, the sweating. I've never sweated like that in my life. As a
Mm-hmm.
younger person, I was an athlete, like track and stuff. I've never. I mean, it was streaming. Like I say, when you see
Yeah.
those, like a professional ball player sit down, and you can see that little stream come off him for a second.
Yes.
It was like that, and I
Yeah.
had to lean forward, and it just, I was just like, "What the heck is happening?" And like saying, then my body trying to get rid of it. All of a sudden, I'd be like ice cold, like free, like I was out in the
Mm-hmm.
snow cold.
Yeah.
Then the hot would come again, and we weren't,
Yeah.
we didn't know. I'd never had a seizure before, and like I said, that's when my wife said I just hit the floor, and she said it was terrible. She said it looked like someone was electrocuting you. Like, some people have grand mal seizures, and it's not visually as bad, but
Mm-hmm.
apparently mine were pretty visually bad, like just shaking and flopping, and it was,
Mm-hmm.
like she said, like someone was seriously electrocuting me, and it's weird because like when you're talking about your son, I'm like, that's so dramatic, and and like I personally don't know how you did it. As the person having the seizure, I've felt the opposite way. Like
Mm-hmm.
I felt so terrible doing that to my wife. And one time my son did come in the room, and he's severely autistic, but he still knows when something's wrong with dad. And
Yeah.
I can't imagine what he was thinking. My wife having to go through that several times.
Mhm.
And so there's like a I I guess you'd kind of say like a survivor's guilt,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
in reverse, So
Yeah.
it was a lot to deal with, and it definitely affected my brain, like how I thought, what I thought, and just it's been quite the journey.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that with us. As far as with how did your wife respond to that? I mean, had she ever seen anybody include well, obviously she'd never seen you have a seizure, but had
Yes.
she ever seen anybody have a seizure before? Because it's very scary the first time you
Hmm.
see
Yeah.
somebody have a seizure.
Yeah. We have a daughter, and she's type 1 and type 2 diabetic,
Hmm.
which but a lot of people don't even know that's possible. We've been to doctors who don't know that's possible.
Hmm.
She was 8. I call her my bonus daughter. I'm not her
Hmm.
actual father, but we've been together. She's 30 something now, and she was 8 then, so she's my daughter. But and I saw her have a seizure, and maybe she was 10. And
Hmm.
like even now, it kind of gets me like emotional, and just it's
Yeah.
such, especially a child,
Yeah.
and another time, and a lot of this has sorry, let's take a phone keeps ringing. Guys, 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. So that provoked me, because Rose gave me CPR and saved my life. I have a pretty huge social media following. I've had up to 200,000 people before on Instagram. So I
Hmm.
started promoting like learn CPR. Like
Yeah.
you don't have to be certified, learn it. You can get
Hmm.
on YouTube right now and learn it in 5 minutes,
Great
and
idea.
not being a hypocrite, I did the same thing. And
Hmm.
I ended up giving CPR to a 1-year-old who was having a major seizure,
Hmm.
like eyes up in her head,
Yeah.
no, we're in this huge like birthday. It was her birthday party, 1 years old. And there's a ton of people. Nobody knew what to do.
Mm,
Nobody.
yes, yes.
The seizure thing, I knew what to do. So I got her on the ground, got on her side. And that's when I noticed her hands were turning blue. And I
Yeah,
looked at my wife and I said, "It's time for CPR. The ambulance is not going to be here." And my wife just shook her head, yes. So I gave her mouth to mouth. And about the third breath, she started breathing again, woke up
praise
screaming,
God.
crying,
Yeah,
and her mom was freaking out. But I was like, that's the best thing, because you can't cry like that if you can't
yeah,
breathe. When you cry, you breathe hard, So, but it was I don't know. It's. I guess for that, I'm grateful for being epileptic, because I might not have known what to do. I might not have never taught myself CPR, and and it was pretty traumatic. Like having your life saved is one thing, saving somebody's life is one thing, but bringing a 1-year-old back to life,
yeah,
it was, I was like on this crazy like high for the
yeah,
rest of the day. Just, it was just like, not even a high like, oh, it was so great. Just like, I can't believe that happened, or,
yeah,
so it's, so anybody out there, learn
yeah.
CPR,
I think that's great. I mean, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, we are gonna post that in our groups that everyone needs to learn CPR, and I am gonna drive that point home on my
Yes.
TikToks other social media handles to learn CPR. I think that
Yeah.
is great, great
Yeah.
advice.
Yeah. Like,
Certainly a nugget
yeah, and
for
you don't
today.
you don't have to be certified. Like my wife was certified because she had to be for her job. But like, so
Yeah.
you can get on YouTube, find a channel you like or trust, or there's even fireman channels, so you're learning from the right
Yeah.
person.
Yes. Yeah.
It's 5 minutes. You pretty much know what to do. If even that. You know what I mean? And so you might save a stranger's life. You might save your wife's life or somebody you love, or
Yep.
just it's worth 5 minutes of your time.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, you know
I
what?
couldn't
I'm gonna
imagine.
definitely do that. I know that. I'm gonna definitely
Yeah,
take your advice up on that
yeah.
for sure.
'Cause I couldn't
And
have imagined standing there and watching that kid die, because she was
yeah.
gonna. Nobody knew what to do. Like say, her hands were already blue, and she's just teeny. She was a preemie, had 8 surgeries by the time she
Mhm.
was 1 years old. So nobody giving her CPR, she wouldn't have made it. And like I said, had I not known it,
Yeah.
I watched her die, and it was a friend of mine's kid too. So even worse, if that's possible. So yeah, learn
Yeah.
CPR.
Yeah, Mike, we need a big ticker coming across saying learn CPR and maybe a video link where people can go and learn that. I think that's great advice. Jinx, thank you so much for sharing that with us today, because
Yeah,
I think that's going to be very, very valuable information for our audience. So you were mentioning like being a parent, or even seeing a child have a seizure. Now the statistics are 1 in 26 will be diagnosed with epilepsy. So you're
wow,
part of that 1 in 26 because you got
wow,
diagnosed when you were in your 40s. And 1 out of 10 will have a seizure at some point. So even though they haven't been necessarily diagnosed with epilepsy, they will have 1 in 10 will have a seizure in their lifetime. 1 out of every
yeah.
10 people
Well,
will have a seizure in their
you
lifetime.
you can have a seizure and not even know it. Like since my brain surgery, I haven't had grand mal's anymore, but I do have petite mal's, and they might. And I just had a seizure. Like just like that, I'll even finish my sentence. My wife will make me sit down because it doesn't seem real to me. She's like, "You just had a seizure." I'm like, "I did," or like I say, "How do you know?"
Mhm.
But I do, and I was out to lunch with my little brother one time. I like stopped chewing, and like my mouth was just all weird, and I came out of it, and he was standing beside me with his hand on my shoulder, which he's never seen me have a seizure, which was terrifying to him. But like, so you can literally have 1 second seizure. So people don't always know that they've even
Yeah.
had one. You know?
And we talk about it a lot in this show, Jinx, that people think that epilepsy is only contained to seizures. And there's
Mhm.
so many other, you know, just dis-ease that comes with epilepsy, meaning fatigue, mood swings, anxiety,
Yes,
depression,
yes,
digestive disorders, and the list goes on and on and on. So it's
yes,
not just only seizures, although that is a big part of being diagnosed with epilepsy. There's so many other things, lack of sleep. I mean, there's
yes.
so many
You,
different
you've
issues. Yeah.
you've named so many that I've dealt with, from mad anxiety, like debilitating anxiety, to panic attacks, to not being able to sleep, to thinking things that I would normally never think. I went through maybe a couple weeks of mad suicidal thoughts.
Yeah.
Like it's all I could think about, like literally
So
all I could
sorry.
think about. Getting angry easy, being frustrated with my wife or son easy, which I'm totally not. Like I have the best wife in the world. I love her so much. And, it was one of the things that really made me aware of it, because I was being a jerk, and I went,
Yeah.
I'm a glass blower. I went downstairs to work a little bit, and it just like overwhelmed me. Like, what are
Mhm.
you doing? You're an
Mhm.
idiot. So I literally marched up the stairs and apologized to my wife, because she
Mhm.
doesn't deserve that. And, I was bawling like a baby. It
Mhm.
just hit me. I was walking down the hall, and my son was kind of in the way, and I nudged him to the side. I would
Mhm.
never do that. Never. If somebody did that to my son, I'd kick their butt.
Mhm.
And here I am doing it. So it was all on the same day, and that all came together, and that's when I had that epiphany. But it also helped me stop it. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
call myself out or realize when I'm feeling that way and pull it back in, because that's not who I am. Like I
Yeah.
said, my wife and my son are everything.
Yeah.
They're
Do you
all that
think
matters.
do you think your wife feels a sense of insecurity at all that you can pick up on? I was very insecure. You were talking about as a parent, seeing, your bonus daughter have a seizure, or see this 1-year-old child have a seizure and start to get emotional over that, and how difficult it is. It was very difficult for me to see my son have seizures all the time, these big grand mal seizures where he would lose his bladder, his tongue would be all bitten up. He was
Hmm.
out for the rest of the day. It was like
Yeah.
he just slept the rest of the day. So, there's a huge insecurity piece that I had to live with, that over that 4 years period of like, oh my gosh, is my son alive this morning? Is he going to be alive tomorrow morning? Is he going to have a seizure? There were times, oh my God, Jinx, I remember a time when my son had a seizure and it was so bad. It was like the one you were talking about that you had, where he was literally turning blue. And I was praying and I was like, God, please do not let this boy go right now. I am not ready right now. Please, God, I can't lose him right now. So just that insecurity of just, being around somebody with epilepsy that you love and you care about so much. Do you ever talk to your wife about that now? Does she ever feel this sense of like, oh my gosh, I don't even know if that's something you talk about. I never talked about it with my son, but I wonder if your wife, knowing that you have epilepsy, if she's scared or wobbles in and out of fear or insecurity.
Um, I'm I'm sure she did. Like I said, back when it started, I was having them all the time, and it's scary, especially having a special needs child. I mean, I couldn't imagine having to raise him by myself or her. You know what I mean? It's tough. And for those who don't know, I might already said, but my son is autistic. He's nonverbal, and he doesn't take care of himself. So yeah, having to do that alone and still, I was the breadwinner. She didn't work at the time. So now there's that. I'm sure it did. She didn't really probably bring it up a lot in front of me because anxiety and stuff like that can bring on a seizure. So. But yeah, I mean, definitely the first few times, she'd come into the hospital room, and of course she'd start crying, and we almost lost each other. Because it's not just her losing me; it's me losing her too.
Yeah.
So it was pretty emotional. But on the other hand, like my wife is a soldier. My wife is strong. Like for real. Like my wife is strong physically, mentally, emotionally, which I'm pretty lucky. Because had she not been, there's a good chance I'd be dead. But she's a very strong person. I always joke. My wife's from Jersey.
Say no more.
You don't mess with.
Our co-host is from New Jersey, Alyssa.
And she knows you don't mess with Jersey girls.
Yes.
I joke, like I threaten grown men with my wife. They're like, don't make me get my wife out here. She's from Jersey. She'll break you out, fool. But I think I do. Every place in the world is so different, and I do think that is part of it. Why she's so strong. And she also grew up in a low income family with 8 kids, and so she had no sink or swim kind of thing. But that's so yeah. I mean, but she's still human too. So of course it was and is hard on her because it's not like it's over.
Yeah. So now you've had a lot of success. Did you get on the right medication right away after you were diagnosed, and or did you have to change medications? How did that kind of play in? And are you still having seizures, or have they stopped?
I went through a bunch of different kinds of medication, and nothing was really working.
So, when you were diagnosed with the epilepsy, did you get on medications right away? Were you on a lot of different medications? And then did that stop your seizures? Because you've obviously went on to live a very fruitful life that's had a lot of success. And we'll talk about that as well. But were you on a lot of medications, or how did that
I was and am. Nothing really seemed to be working. And then what I started to say was I was at a neurology appointment, and my doctor looked at me and said, it's time to talk about brain surgery. And it was like slamming the brakes on a car, just like, what did you just say? Like, did you just say brain surgery?
Oh my gosh.
And it was terrifying. And he's like, yeah, there's 2 kinds we do. One, we're going to make like a triangle in your skull. We're going to take it out, and we're going to cut the front part of your left hippocampus off. Because through all the MRIs and x-rays, I had scar tissue on my front hippocampus. They weren't sure if the seizures were causing that or that was causing the seizures. So, but it's like he's describing a lobotomy. We're going to cut the front part of your brain off. And I was just terrified. He's like, but we have this other thing we've been doing, technology and whatnot. And he's like, and it's a lot less invasive. We can always start small and go big. You can't start big and go small. So what they did was they drilled a little hole in the back of my skull, and then they slid a laser up there, and they just burn that part of the brain instead of cutting it off. And it worked. So
Wow.
yeah, it was, it was probably 4 hour surgery. I went home, I think the next day or the next day. I can't remember. It wasn't a big deal. The worst part of the surgery was they put your head in a cage and they literally screw it down, because the doctor's like, if I'm in there with a laser
Oh yeah.
and you start having a seizure, he's like,
Mhm.
I could literally, like, it could go through your eye, it
Yeah.
could burn the wrong part of the brain. So I had all these little stitches over my head where they, clamp me, but who cares compared to removing a piece of my skull. So that,
Wow.
that was, that was the biggest part.
This is like, okay, we got to talk about this for a minute. This is like, I did not know that you had brain surgery. Okay.
Yes.
I've always
Yeah.
wanted to like talk about this for the epilepsy community because I
Uh-huh.
really don't know a lot about this. So,
Yeah.
is this a certain type of epilepsy? Because obviously, my son would not be a candidate for that. Alyssa, one
Mhm.
of our co hosts, she actually went to go and talk to her doctor about that. Not a candidate, has a very specific type of epilepsy that is non-resistant to even medication. So is this a very specific type of epilepsy that you have that made you a candidate for this surgery?
I honestly don't know.
Really?
I honestly don't know yet. Like I say, after all the MRIs and X-rays and all that, I did a ton of them. That's when they said you have scar tissue on your brain. I don't know why. I was never in like like a car accident where I flew through the
Mhm.
window. Or, I did have a pretty bad accident on a bicycle when I was a kid, to the point of it
Mhm.
knocked my teeth out. You know,
Oh,
um,
yeah, yeah.
and I had like the side of my face was kind of road rash, not my skull, but your brain's still in there rattling around. So I don't know if that had anything to do with it. Being a wild young adult, from the
Mhm.
partying and stuff like that, which I don't party at all anymore. Aside from a little bit of cannabis.
Yeah.
Um, so really, nobody knows. My doctor doesn't know, and we just know that it happened. For anybody facing surgery, ask your doctor about laser ablation. That's what it was
Okay.
called.
Okay.
Because most half people I know are like, I never even heard of that. But I guess it's a newer thing. So,
Yes.
but like I
Yes.
said, it was nothing compared to, you know, having my piece of my skull removed, replaced by titanium, which can cause major problems, headaches, blah blah blah, even rejecting it. So it doesn't, it's hard to even call it surgery. It obviously it was, but it wasn't that big a deal, and it
Yeah.
did stop. I've only
Wow.
had one grand mal since my surgery.
Wow.
And as you know, if you're epileptic, the main cause of seizures is alcohol or stress. And I
Mhm.
had a massive heart attack. They call it the
Yeah.
widowmaker. Only
Wow.
12% of people survive this kind of heart attack.
Gosh.
And I started having it, and they got me. The ambulance, was helping me, but I didn't actually have my heart attack till I was in the hospital with the heart doctor. And he's like,
Mhm.
if you'd had that at home or in the ambulance, you would not have survived. But
Mhm.
so I started having a massive heart attack right there,
Mhm. Mhm.
which I also started to have a major seizure, which a heart attack is pretty stressful. Back to
Mhm.
the whole,
Mhm.
stress causes seizures. Well, obviously that's pretty stressful. So I did have a full on seizure, but aside from that, I've never had a seizure, aside from the little ones I was telling you about. One that's going to kill me. So
Wow. I
so
mean,
it's pretty
this
good.
is a good opportunity for us to just say, look, this is going to be, several shows. But if you have questions about the surgery, and different things that Jinx went through, because Jinx, am like, I want to do a whole series on the surgeries that epileptics can have, maybe even have some neurologists and some surgeons on here so that people can ask their questions. And we
Mm,
can get some good content around that, because this is a
yeah,
subject I think that a lot of people that have epilepsy would like to know if they are a candidate for this surgery or not, because I don't think
yeah,
everybody is, but I'm sure there are some that are. There are over 3.4 million epileptics just in the USA. There are
wow,
50 million worldwide, Jinx. And the amount of support, this is why it's so important. And we thank God for you today that you're willing to come and be so transparent about just your journey, your epileptic journey.
sure,
Even sharing about you know, the autism with your son and your wife and just different things like that, because there is so little research dollars spent in epilepsy. When you think about just this statistic for a minute, there are more people, okay, with epilepsy than cerebral palsy, autism, Parkinson's, and MS combined.
Wow.
More people with epilepsy. I have chills all over my body, but yet only $240 million a year is spent in research, comparable to Parkinson's, which is over 250 million, 1/3 of the size of the community of epilepsy, as well as Jinx. More money, billions of dollars, over $4 billion is spent for dementia and Alzheimer's, another community that is only 3 times the size of epileptics. So
Wow.
when you at the beginning said, you know, I don't know how exactly you made this statement, but you said, you know, it's not like something that like people really talk about. You know, you never maybe really talked about your epilepsy. It's not like really out there, you know, there's not a lot of advocacy for it. And I really don't know why that is. I mean, we've talked about it on the show. Jinx, do you think that there's something, do you think that there's a reason for that? You're a very wise man. You got diagnosed later in life. You went under the surgery. You were on medication. You know, you have an autistic child. Do you think that there's a reason for that?
Well, I don't think the average person is even, they might be epileptic and not know it yet. It's not really going to be engaged in a conversation unless they have a reason to. You know, I engage in conversations because, you know, people that know me, love me, or close to me, whatever, they ask about it, you know. But like one thing you said was the research. And what that made me think, it doesn't really answer your question, but on a different note, it's important to do your own research. I had a neurologist because it's like we were talking about earlier, a lot comes with the seizures, depression, anxiety, and I was getting mad depression. I get what I call physical depression, where it's not just my brain, but my body is just like, you know, and that's not me. So I was talking to this doctor, and he's like, "Oh yeah, try this pill," and he gives me this pink pill. I go get it, and I went home. I did some research, and I come back. He's like, "Have you been taking that pill?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Why?" I said, "Because I looked it up, and the first thing it said was do not take if you have seizures."
Yeah, it's right there.
Yeah, a neurologist, my brain doctor subscribed me this. So it's important to do your own research. You have to take everything with a grain of salt, you know, Dr. Google, you know, like a lot of doctors hate that. Yeah, and I understand why, because there's a lot of misinformation, but this was like from the actual drug company's website, you know, and stuff. And then I also researched diet, which doctors are not required to take any nutrition, period.
That's true.
You could be a brain surgeon and never take, you know, and they don't. Why take if you don't need to? And at the time, I was one of my favorite things is watermelon. And aside from eating it, I would juice it. And just like nothing is more refreshing than a fresh, cold glass of watermelon juice. It's like, so I decided to Google it one day, and it says, one thing you should avoid is watermelon.
Oh my gosh.
Like a glass of watermelon juice is probably 4 or 5 pieces of watermelon. You know, here I'm chugging it. But of course, my doctor there, you know, and same thing. Oh, I didn't know that. Or he almost looked at me like, like he didn't believe it, you know. But
yeah,
I've had problems with doctors, you know, which there's been doctors I've just wanted to slap. You know,
yeah.
just,
So you're saying do your own research, which I love that.
Yes,
You know, do your own advocacy.
yeah.
Don't depend on the research dollars of the federal government, because you're not going to get your answers there.
I said my doctor didn't know any of that. He prescribed me a pill, didn't even know that. You know. So, 1 second. Okay, I'm back. So I don't know how to stop that.
That's okay. So I want to
research.
Oh, go ahead, Jinx. Go ahead.
I'd say research is important. You know, look at more than one page, because like say Dr. Google, you know, a lot of times it's just somebody writing their stuff. It's not, you know, necessarily a doctor or, you know, or a, you know, so, you know, be vigilant about it. Don't just take the first thing you see, and, you know, but like the watermelon thing, it came up in many articles, and it's because of there's slow sugars and fast sugars. and I forget which one it was, but that's what was happening, is that sugar was affecting my body, therefore triggering seizures,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
for any medical situation, being healthy is obviously important,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, that's so great. I love everything you're saying. I want to transition to cannabis. So
Sure.
you are and have had a tremendous amount of success in the cannabis industry.
Hmm.
And last week we were having a show on burnout, specifically with medical burnout. People are burnout on medications, Keppra rage. We've talked about that. We've talked about neurologists not really recommending diet. So we've kind of run the gamut on those things with regard to medications. And we wanted to start to move into some shows around medical burnout and other options that there could be. What do you think about cannabis, specifically with epilepsy? And, do you have a strain for that? Or, I don't know anything about cannabis. I am like a Nazarite. I'm that girl that never did a drug in her life. I have so much
Right.
dopamine and serotonin flowing through my body. I could light up a planet. But
Uh,
can you kind of, like, how did that all even start? And do you think that there's a place or space for that with regard to epilepsy?
hmm there absolutely is. All epileptics are different. So cannabis might help some people. It might cause some problems with other people, especially somebody that didn't smoke cannabis. Like a lot of them, it can be too much. And especially like say I'm 57. When I was a kid, really good weed was probably 9% THC. Now you go to the stores, it's 25, 30%, which is almost a third of the plant. Like with it being legal, it's allowed people to come out of the closet as far as knowledge, as far as science, as far as grow techniques, so it's really gone crazy as far as how strong it is or this or that, so it's for somebody who's never done it, I would say, like, if you're curious, start very small, like most people don't like to smoke, but smoking isn't as strong as eating it. When you eat it, your liver turns it into a new drug called alpha hydroxy 11, which
Mm,
is like 10 times stronger than smoking. So a lot of people will go buy a cookie, eat it, and be out of their mind high to where it wasn't fun. It was like a terrible experience. It's just because they're just way too high. And the big goal isn't necessarily to be high, but to try and manage. CBDs are a big thing. You can get products now that are only CBD with no THC for somebody who doesn't want that side
mhm.
of it. And there's been some great stories. I don't know if you ever heard of the girl Charlotte. There's a
Yes, I was just
strain
about to ask you about
the
that. Yeah.
strain called Charlotte's Web, and
Mhm.
she was having like 300 seizures a month or something crazy.
Mhm,
I
mhm,
mean, I can't quote it, but they approached her, and her dad's a retired Marine. He's like, you didn't give my kid no weed, are you
crazy.
crazy? But then he started to learn all this stuff. People started approaching me, and he started trying it, strictly CBD, no THC, and she went down to like 3 seizures a month, or something
Wow,
incredible.
wow.
She did pass away, unfortunately, but
Yeah.
it made the rest of her life more comfortable and relaxing. And CBD definitely helps me. I started taking CBD capsules. I mean,
Mhm,
I was a major weed smoker most of my life. As a kid,
mhm.
I was totally what they would call a stoner. Like I was a total stoner. Not because of epilepsy, just because.
I went just to school
So
with some stoners.
I was one of those guys. Yeah, the rocker with the long hair. And all, but um, but the CBD I definitely noticed helped. For a while, I stopped smoking because the effect of the epilepsy and the smoking together
Mhm,
would give
mhm.
me crazy anxiety. Like
Mm.
we might be having a barbecue, and I'd take a little puff or something. I have to go lay down in my room for a half hour or something because I was just angst out. I couldn't be around these people. I was just
Mm.
like, because anxiety is more than your brain. For me,
Yeah.
I get it physically, and I compare it to like when you go down an elevator too fast and like your stomach kind of comes up for a second, and it's kind of funny, But for me, that will happen for 30 minutes straight. And that's not a good feeling. Like say, when I was a kid, my dad would zoom down the bottom of a hill and your stomach would do that. And it was funny. But imagine feeling that for 20, 30 minutes and never going away. You know what I mean? It would literally make my mouth water, like literally. I could taste it all the way up into my throat. Like I didn't know you could taste anxiety, So I actually, it was driving me crazy. And I didn't even realize. I looked at my wife one day and I was like, I don't think I've smoked weed for like a week. I didn't try to quit or anything. It just kind of happened,
Yeah.
And so I was, up to that moment, I was full on stoner. You know what I mean? I did wake and bake. What they, in the middle of the day, dinner, whatever. A lot of my friends were too, but so I really backed off. Now I mostly only I use a vape pen. So it was kind of funny when I had my heart attack. I didn't realize my doctor knew who I was. I don't know if one of the nurses knew or something. I always hate saying this because it sounds like I'm so cool, but I get recognized in public a lot and stuff. So there's a good chance one of the nurses knew who I was or something. And the doctor, after I was ready to go, he's like, blah, 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 do this, do that. And he's like, and I don't want you smoking. I said, I've never smoked because I've never been a cigarette smoker, which is, cigarettes are terrible for your heart. It's the number one cause of heart disease.
Yeah,
So I was like, I've never smoked because I never have. One puff when I was a little kid, barfed my guts out and I was cool, So I said, I've never smoked. And he kind of leans forward. He says, I don't want you smoking anything. Which I knew exactly what he meant. Yeah. So, because even like smoke from a barbecue is bad for you.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Smoke period. So, that kind
all
of
those carcinogens, all those carcinogens.
Yeah.
I'm always telling the ladies, I'm like, ladies, do you want really good skin? You can't smoke. I mean, it's just the way it goes. It is the worst thing for your skin is to smoke. The best thing is obviously water, but you can always tell when the skin is just really bad is it always has to do with smoking. So I get that. It's interesting that you said about the edibles because I didn't realize that, there's a lot of people that try to self-medicate. And I think it was also good that you pointed out that the weed that was way back in the day was like, I think you said 8%, and now it's like 25 to 30 THC.
Yeah, you couldn't sell that weed now. Yeah, that old weed, you couldn't sell it now. People would be like, I'll give you a dime for a pound, because, but what I was going to say is I could not sleep. And the only way I could sleep was with a bunch of benzos, like Valium, Xanax, and which are actually, they can cause dementia later in life.
Yeah.
They're a big time memory loss, which I was experiencing a lot because of my seizures. So what I did and do is when I'm laying in bed, I have a vape pen. I just take a couple little hits and it knocks me out compared to taking a handful of benzodiazepines, like say whichever, they're very addictive. They have a long-term effect. One of them being like Alzheimer's and dementia, stuff like that, which, I'm already dealing with enough. I don't need that. So from backing off on the smoking, my tolerance is so low. So if I hit a couple hits on that vape pen, like I'm out, it's like I'm asleep before I'm high, which I don't like say the high would give me anxiety. So it's kind of weird, so, but I'm grateful I figured it out because, like I say, you can't not sleep. Not sleeping is going to cause a seizure because of all the stress, blah, blah, blah. So it was hard on my wife. It was hard on me. And, I've got stuff to do. I'm self-employed. At the time I was still a glass blower. So I blew glass, 6 to 8 hours a day, which I can't blow glass if I'm all high on benzos, so which I have actually stopped blowing glass because I think it might have affected my epilepsy some. Yeah. So it's not a healthy sport. It's actually quite unhealthy. There's lead, cadmium, all kinds of stuff in glass. People think glass is made out of sand. It is not.
Wow, really?
It's made out of a ton. There's a synthetic sand they use,
right.
But also cadmium, lead. I work on a lathe. And a lathe is this machine. I put a tube of glass in it, and it's spinning super fast. And I have this giant torch. And I'm thinking like that thing is, even though I have a big exhaust fan above me, like that thing is spinning right at me. You got to be
Right.
pretty close to do
Yeah.
what you're doing. Plus, I use a huge torch, like like a lot of glass blowers torch are like that. Mine's like that, because
Wow.
I make giant vessels. Most glass blowers I know make pipes, but they're little hand pipes or stuff like that. I
Yeah.
make giant vessels. My
Wow.
main living, to tell you the truth, was bongs, so I had to have a big giant flame for that. And
Wow.
you can also get what's called propane poisoning. And like if you go to a glass blower studio, if you reach up to the roof, you can draw a picture through all the carbon from the flame. Like say, no
Wow.
matter how many fans you got, it's just one of the things you deal with. So
Wow.
I backed off on glass blowing a lot. I only blow glass a little right now. Like at Christmas, I make Christmas ornaments and you know
Wow.
and
Oh my
getting
gosh.
involved in
I
this.
wish we had some pictures, Mike, of some of his things that he's done. That would be so amazing. We'd love to see some of your work maybe next time. But
Yeah,
also too, do you think that played a part in you getting epilepsy later in life? Do you think, or
I
no?
I think quite possibly. Like I say, it's not exactly healthy, and like
Yeah.
so I work on large vessels with a huge torch. You know what I mean? Like say some glass blowers, their torches are so small because they're just making little hand pipes, or like so
Mhm.
I make giant bongs basically. I mean, I like to make art in vessels, but getting paid for them is almost impossible. Especially in Seattle. Seattle's considered the land of glass blowing, so
Yeah.
you're competing with 10 billion glass blowers. So doing art and stuff, just it doesn't.
Wow. Is
That's
that one of your pieces that you made?
no.
What is that? It's so beautiful. I don't know. Is there something, maybe I think Mike's trying to find something on
You
your
won't. It's
page.
been so long since I've blown glass. You're not going to find any glass on there.
Wow.
Maybe,
Well, you gotta
maybe a
send some
Christmas
pictures. Yeah.
ornament. Like I recently did a couple posts where I said, this year I'm not because the studio is at shut down. So I said I'm really missing making glass ornaments this year because it's something I
Yeah.
do every year. But I didn't have anywhere to do it.
Yeah.
That picture, me and my wife, we've been bowling lately. We have some friends that bowl.
Ah,
We're
it looks
we're
like
we're
glass.
just we're just novice. Like we don't take it serious. It's a great way to get together with friends and be doing something, besides watching TV. But Rose is a very small person. She's only 5 feet tall. So
Oh
when we
my
go to the
gosh.
bowling alley, all the bowling out when we leave, the bowling ball would mess up her elbow, like
Hmm.
because they were too big and too heavy. And so I got her that ball, which I found this company that does like designer balls. So I got her that, like that kind of pink color is one of her favorite colors. So I got her that because I got one in 6 pounds.
Oh my
So
gosh, look how tiny it is. You can fit it like in
yeah,
your hand. It's
yeah,
so amazing. I love butterflies.
it's not tiny. It's still a regulation. I think it's the way I filmed it, but it's still a regular bowling ball, but it's
Oh
made
wow.
out of like bowling ball stuff and plastic, so it's way
Wow.
lighter. But my wife's a big time flower. Like she grows tons of flowers, so I saw the
Wow.
butterflies and the flowers. I was like, oh, I gotta get that. So,
Oh, that's so
so
amazing. What
but
an
that's what
amazing
that
gesture you are.
is.
Oh,
I don't
that's
own a
so
bowling ball. She's all
that's
nervous because I also got her a bag to keep it in. She's like, I'm gonna walk in the bowling alley and everybody's gonna think like I'm this awesome bowler.
I know, right?
Neither one of us are. We just enjoy it. So,
Oh my gosh. Well, you fit the part, you know. I mean, you gotta look the part. You definitely look the part. Mike, do you want
uh,
to get in here? This has been amazing, Mike. I am so grateful that you have arranged for this interview to happen because this man is a stellar human being. And not only that,
thanks.
I think that Jinx and Mike and everyone in the epilepsy community, I'm not an epileptic, but I was a caretaker of my son who was epileptic, who passed with SUDEP. And I just believe that this community of caretakers and epileptics are just warriors. I mean, they are just full blown, full out warriors. And you have proved that again today, Jinx. So what say you, Mike?
Well, I think you kind of have to be with any disease. If you give up, then the disease wins.
Mhm. Yeah.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming on. I
Yeah.
want to encourage people to go to your website and, of course, follow
Mhm.
you on Instagram.
Yes.
And wanted to ask you, do you have any thought? Okay, so a lot of our seizures and a lot of our epileptic symptoms that we deal with you know, our anxiety, lack of sleep, things of that nature.
Mhm.
And if you could give us some ideas of strains, maybe if we are prescribed or we do find that cannabis helps us, maybe so, because as you know, man, the average bud tender just may not know. They, you know, they may
No,
really not
no,
know
yeah,
on a level
they
that
really
you
don't.
would. So
Yeah,
if you could give us some
yeah.
ideas of that, and then I'd like to close out with
Mhm.
a couple of your latest Instagram drops. He
Mhm.
drops awesome, inspirational, thought-provoking Instagram shorts like every day, guys.
Mm.
Highly recommend you go check them out. They're really awesome.
Mhm.
It's
And
actually because of my epilepsy that I started doing that.
oh,
But
awesome.
So
when we get there,
awesome.
I'll tell you that story when we get there. As far as the cannabis, for me, like there's two kinds of cannabis. There's three, I guess. There's sativa and there's indica. Sativa is considered an uplifting daytime kind of weed, where indica is what they call a heavy foot, like chill
Mm.
on the couch, relax. Like for me, I can't smoke a sativa. It
Mm.
gives me even before epilepsy, I wouldn't smoke sativa. I don't
Mhm.
like that racy kind of upper feeling, like you drank too much coffee.
Mhm.
I can't relate to that feeling. I don't like it. So I'd rather not smoke than smoke a sativa, especially a purebred one. Indicas are and have always been my jam. You know, they don't. You know, some people are like they call it couch lock. It doesn't give me couch lock. You know, it actually helps me focus and stuff. Then there's also hybrids, which might be like 30% sativa and the rest indica, or 50-50. So um, if you're experiencing anxiety, I would say stay away from the sativas,
Mhm.
because they straight, even before my epilepsy, straight gave me anxiety. I just don't like that feeling, you know. So
Yeah. Well, tell us, I thank you for all of that. Tell us about epilepsy is what took you into, right? The cannabis?
no, epilepsy.
Oh, the Instagram, the Instagram, the
He's
Instagram. You were
talking.
talking about the
He's
Instagram
talking
post.
about
Yeah.
a. He's talking about a different thing. Every morning and right before I go to bed, I do a positive affirmation video, encouraging people to be positive. Um, oh, I got the wrong hat on, but like my hats, there's none in here, but like my Jinx proof hats, you know, like the at symbol, except
Yes.
for the A, it's a B. Like, yeah, there's one right there with the plus
Love
next to
it.
it.
Okay.
And
And do you
a
sell
plus,
those?
I have Jinx proof hats that have that on the side, as well as
Awesome.
the autism logo. But
Okay.
I don't have the beanies. But that right there, like a plus on a battery, means positive. So it's
Okay.
be positive. That's what that little logo means.
I love
So,
that.
so every morning I get up and I do a positive affirmation video, and then I also type a positive affirmation under the video, encouraging people to be positive. And it started because when I had my first seizure, like I said, my son's pretty autistic. You know, there's a part of him not, but there's like he don't talk, stuff like that.
Mhm.
So I came home from my seizure, which I was tripping out because I'd never had a seizure. It almost killed me, and then my son came around the corner. It was just like, whew, it just like
Mhm.
it made it even more real. It's like I
Mhm.
could not be here right now for my son. No
Mhm.
one, like my wife's a beautiful woman and a great, like, of course down the road, say I die, she gonna meet somebody, maybe get married, whatever, I wouldn't, that's fine. But nobody's going to take care of your son like you're gonna.
Yeah.
No stepdad. I'm not saying stepdads are bad. My stepmom was my mom and she was great. But
Mhm.
nobody's going to take. So it just overwhelmed me. So I did a video that night being positive and doing a positive quote. And
So awesome.
I woke up in the morning and I had all these responses and comments. And I was like, wow, people really like that. So I did one that morning. And it just snowballed into this thing where I've never not done it. When I had my brain surgery, Rose got on my phone and did it for me. Like I never don't do it. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's been a great thing. When I go to these cannabis conventions and stuff, I have as many people come up to me about that as I do being a cannabis breeder. And the
Yeah.
guy that bred the 9-pound hammer, they're like, dude, those do so much for me every day, and it's so rewarding, and it's self therapy too, because positive self affirmations are very powerful.
Very
Like,
powerful.
I say them all the time. I encourage people
Yeah.
to, I've had people on my Instagram reach out to me because of that, not because of weed, and
Yeah.
I had one guy was leaving like kind of suicidal comments on some of my
Mm.
posts. And I was like, whoa, what's
Wow.
that? So I actually video called him on Instagram. And again, I say, I hate saying this. Like, I hate the word like famous or yeah,
Yeah.
influencer, but
Mm.
he couldn't believe I called him, It's, I was like, bro, what's going on with, this, it's seemingly,
Oh.
So we talked, and he told me a lot of his he was crying, really let it out like I was a counselor. Maybe it was easy because he doesn't know me,
Yeah.
And so then when he was done, I gave him some what I would call homework. I was like, do this, and then one of them was I was like, take a page every day and write a positive affirmation and write
Mm.
it over and over. I said, don't
Yeah.
write a bunch, pick one and write that same
Yeah.
positive
Yeah.
affirmation that has something to do with your situation. Because he also
Yeah.
had kids and stuff like that. And I was like, if you do it every day for 30 days, send me a picture when you do so I know that you've done it. At the end of that 30 days, I'll send you a free pack of seeds, which really
Mm.
isn't that big a deal, for me. I breed them, but it was
Yeah.
like a huge thing to him,
Oh
because
my gosh, of course. It's like you just thought of him. You gave him hope.
yeah,
You
he was
understand?
having a
I know you know this. Hope is
yeah,
powerful.
yeah,
Mood is
self-talk
powerful.
is powerful.
Oh.
I always say, don't say anything about yourself you don't want to be true, because no one
Yeah.
listens to your IQ. So he was also struggling with drugs and alcohol. And before we talked about that, I was like, we can talk about this, but bro, I'm gonna give it to you real. I'm not gonna
Mhm.
pussyfoot with you. I'm gonna tell you. I said, every time you pick up that bottle, you're like, glug glug. I don't care about my kids. Glug glug glug. I don't care about. And same with the drugs. And
Yeah.
it really affected him. He did the every day, wrote me the affirmations, and we talk once in a while. He called me after that, and he's like, "Hey, I just wanted you to know, I'm 2 years clean and sober."
Mhm.
It makes me so happy.
Mhm.
And then he recently called me. It was like 3 years, bro. And he's all, you know, he attributes a lot to me. And I was like, bro, I'm just the one that opened the door. You had to
Mm.
go through and do all the work, but something so simple, because of those positive affirmation videos, So it's been a wonderful thing. And it works on me too. Like sometimes I'll be having a bad day, acting like a jerk, maybe to my wife, and it'll instantly call me out. Because of cannabis, my Instagram always gets canceled. But for a while I was up to 200,000. So I would call myself out like, bro, you get up every morning and tell 200,000 people to be positive, and here you are acting like an idiot, so it instantly puts me in check. And so I mean, I suggest it for everybody, whether it's writing them, saying them. The thing I would encourage the people about writing is, when you're writing it, you're also being physical, so you're
Yeah.
activating more of your brain. You're thinking
So
about it, you're physically doing it,
true.
you're lighting up more of your brain while you're doing it, plus you see it, and you can go back and read them or whatever, or like say, maybe do something with them, So uh,
Mhm.
I used to have these little girls that lived on the street. They didn't have a dad, and there was
Mm.
some other little girls, and they would. It's so funny. They would come to my house, knock on the door, and my wife would ask me like, "Can Jinx play?" Because I was out there throw the football, whatever. So
Oh my
but
gosh.
with them, I started this thing called the Young Ladies Positive Affirmation Club. So every day they had to bring me 3 handwritten positive self affirmations about themselves, and I would put them in this box, pretty good sized box. And when the box was full, like we'd go to the mall, grab lunch, and then give them each $10 to go to Claire's, or
Yeah.
something like that. We'd give them a reward for it, and I always saved them. I've always told Rose, like, I want to do something with those, some kind of art project, or like just put them
Mhm.
all, glue them all together, or maybe photocopy them, make them into a big blanket, or I want to keep them forever. I can't imagine just throwing them away. So,
Aw.
but, that whole epilepsy positive thing bloomed into
Yeah.
that too. And
Yeah.
this was
Yeah.
some time ago. I still talk to these girls. They're all young ladies now, in
Mhm.
college and starting lives and stuff. But the Facebook, or I'll run into them, or stuff like that. So that was a good thing with me becoming epileptic too.
Yeah.
From
Oh my gosh, that
from
is
that
so
guy
amazing.
and girl to myself. So yeah, it's been a funny catalyst.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I love that. I love that you use the word catalyst. That's great. What a wordsmith. Mike, do you have some of these be positive affirmations that you could pull up? This has been such an amazing show. Jinx, we would love to have you come back on. Maybe even get people on here to ask their questions, especially around the surgery. Maybe even people want to come on here and ask questions about cannabis. That
Sure,
are epileptic,
yeah.
that have not yet kind of
Yeah.
made that transition of even trying something, but like you said, they're curious.
No, I'm
So
sure.
yeah, we
I'm an
should
open
definitely
book from the cannabis to the epilepsy. I don't care. I got nothing to hide.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Okay, Mike, what do you got for us? Let's see if he has something here.
I think
Okay,
he's trying to play one of my videos.
Yeah, I love this one. I love this. It says, "I love someone." Oh,
Mike is in the stream.
Hey family, Jinx here. I just want to take that second to wish everybody a wonderful night. Hope you all had a positive, productive day today. I also want to take that second and remind you, while it's great to celebrate success, it's equally as important to appreciate failure's lessons. Y'all be safe. Have a great night.
I love it. Okay, let's see. Here's another one.
Jinx
This is in the morning.
I'll take that second to wish everybody a wonderful day. I hope you're all ready to get some positive, constructive shit up today. I also want to take that second and remind you, we must always be willing to laugh at ourselves and admit when we are wrong. Makes life a lot easier. Y'all be safe. Have a great day. Good morning, family. Jigs Proof here. I just want to take that second. Good morning, family. Jigs Proof here. I just want to take that second to wish everybody a wonderful day. I hope you're all ready to get some positive, constructive shit up today. I also want to take that second and remind you, our dignity can be insulted, assaulted, and even mocked, but it can never be taken, only given. Don't do that.
Don't do that. Don't do that. Oh, I love these. I love these. You have been such a blessing today to interview. Oh my gosh, so gracious. And just thank you so much, Jinx Proof. We just are so blessed to have you on here today. All the best of blessings to your beautiful wife, Rose, and your son and your bonus daughter, and all the things that you're doing in business and advocacy and autism. And we're so blessed to have you today here on the feed. Thank you so very much.
Thank you too. I appreciate it.
Bye, everybody.